How do you cook from scratch when you're just learning how to eat keto or low carb? Now, I have a background in cooking because I grew up on a homestead where we grew all of our own food. We had a huge garden. We spent the summer weeding the garden. We spent the fall harvesting and preserving all of the food. We had a root cellar. The whole basement was dirt, and we could walk into it and we would have all of the many boxes of apples and fruits. And we had canned goods that we had canned in the fall. So food was a big part of my growing up, processing the food, and of course all of it was organic. I look back on that. I hated the garden back then. I hated all of the work that was put into food, but I see the advantages of it in that I grew up having healthy food. But there was a lot of sugar added to everything. My mother loved to bake, and my father loved to eat the food that was baked, and I learned how to do that even before I went to school. So cooking, baking, preserving food, harvesting food, growing food was all a big part of my growing up years until I went to high school. And then my parents wanted me to be a good wife because getting married and having kids was the goal that they had for me. And that was the only end goal for a woman in my situation, in my background. And so going to cooking college after high school was what they wanted me to do. I took a year of cook's training. And so I learned a lot during that year of cooking just about any kind of food, cooking for a fast food restaurant or cooking for a family type restaurant, cooking industrial quantities for like a hospital or something. So I learned both those types of cooking. So just to give some background of where I'm coming from. And then I was in 2 marriages, total of 28 years, and I cooked almost exclusively in those marriages as well. And I have 3 kids, and so I raised my kids with this type of cooking that is typical of most families. You have breads at every meal, you have baked goods, you have desserts, you have, your proteins and your vegetables and fruits, but baked goods and the grains are part of every single meal. So cooking from scratch, when I started to learn about keto and low carb cooking, it was revolutionary to me because this was not what I had done for the previous 50 years. This was a new concept to understand that I'm not going to be adding flour to everything. I'm not going to be adding cornstarch to everything. I'm not going to be always having that bread as part of the base of the meal, and always having a plate that would have, you'd have your protein and you'd have your starch and you'd have your vegetables. That was sort of what I was taught and what I used to cook like all the time. Now, I will say when I tried keto a year and a half ago, it was very, very hard. And I knew it was going to be hard to maintain long term. So I did slow down my goal of losing weight by a certain date, or having that goal weight reached by a certain date, because giving up potatoes was going to be very hard. I was already giving up grains, no more breads, no more rice, etc. So also giving up white potatoes was going to be a little bit too hard for me. So I would try keto a few days and then I would bring in the potatoes. So I guess that's partly called carb cycling, because keeping your carbs gram below 50 each day, or even down to 15 grams of carbs per day, is just really, really hard to maintain when you have a long history of eating a certain way. Now, I am gradually getting used to it more as I'm in maintenance mode, as I'm coming out of this huge amount of time of eating so many grains. I don't mind going a couple days without the starches. It's not as hard to do. Since I've reached the goal weight that I originally had, then I don't necessarily need to keep limiting those carbs to such a degree. So that was a bit of my history. So cooking from scratch is something I've always done, but now this way of cooking from scratch is different because I'm literally taking out a whole food group, such as the grains. And I guess sugar for me was almost like a food group in itself, the desserts, etc. So what I learned was to see it as no limits on the meats, the dairy, the nuts, the eggs, the vegetables, and the fruit, those main groups. And when I didn't limit any of those, none of those tempted me to overeat, except for the nuts. The nuts were very tempting to overeat at times, and so I would have to limit those. But all the rest of them, they weren't my risky foods. It was the cinnamon buns, the chocolate, the candy, the cookies, the cakes, the coffee cake, the muffins. Those were all things that I could not stop eating. Once I got rid of all of those out of my cupboards, out of my fridge, off my grocery list, and I didn't buy those at the drive-through or at a restaurant, then it got a lot easier to start to change my cooking habits. One ingredient cooking was what I ended up realizing what I was doing, and that I had one ingredient food such as carrots, and I cut up the carrots and I would boil them or roast them or steam them. That was one ingredient. It looked the same pretty much from when I was cutting it up to the end product. You could still see it's one ingredient. So most of what I was cooking, and a lot of what I still cook, is one ingredient foods. It's broccoli and cauliflower and asparagus and steak and roast beef and fried chicken and grilled fish and scrambled eggs and boiled eggs. All of these different one ingredient foods that pretty much look the same at the end and the beginning. I'm not making casseroles anymore, because casseroles for me always involved rice or pasta, etc. So I'm not making casseroles anymore. I'm not really making a lot with specific recipes. It's been a challenge. I know I will learn this more and more as I am learning not to add grains into my meal, that I will learn other recipes and I won't be maybe so bored. But the whole idea of boredom also has changed for me, because I see food as fuel. And I eat because I want to fuel my body. It's not the comfort food that it used to be. It's definitely been a change in my thinking about that. So I cook to fuel my body. I eat to fuel my body. And I find comfort in a lot of other things, such as enjoying being a size 6 right now. And those things can replace the comfort that I used to feel from eating ice cream and eating that muffin, etc. And it's just a change of mindset. It really is a change of mindset, a change of habits, and realizing that I reached my goal and I'm able to maintain it also keeps motivating me to stay in this healthy lifestyle. So cooking from scratch has been a change for me. It's been a challenge. I'm still learning about it. I usually do bulk cooking, where I cook a whole bunch of food, a whole lot of variety of food, and then I'll eat that for 2 or 3 days. My daughter, who still lives with me, she eats most of what I prepare for her, and then she goes to her boyfriend's house on the weekends. So I cook maybe 2-3 times a week, a lot of food, make a big mess in the kitchen, and then I just eat leftovers after that. So there's so much less time in the kitchen right now because I'm intermittent fasting. I usually only eat 2 meals a day. And so that's one less meal I'm having to prepare and clean up for, etc. And because I'm at this stage in my life where I don't have young kids around anymore, I will admit that is easier. I'm part of a Facebook group that talks a lot about intermittent fasting, and a lot of them have families, and they talk about what it's like to intermittent fast and what it's like to cook from scratch when their family's not used to eating that. That definitely is a bit more of a challenge than what I'm going through right now. But as I mentioned in other videos, I've had a lot of health problems and health challenges in this last year, such as being diagnosed with cancer, having a full hysterectomy surgery, having hot flashes, which I'm literally having right now, and dealing with all of that. Everybody has life events. We shouldn't necessarily use that as an excuse. We can get through this. We can learn from other people's experiences. Hopefully, me sharing my story, me sharing my journey, I really am excited about helping other people lose weight, find a way to maintain the weight loss and have success, and just feel like your life is changed and your life is transforming, which is what it's felt like for me. So if you like this video, subscribe and share it with a friend or family member, comment below, and I really appreciate you watching. Thank you.